A very warm welcome to everyone. Those who are in India, good evening. Thanks for taking time and joining this webinar. For people in other parts, good morning or good afternoon. So I ran the session on Agile and Agile models a month back. I think some of you may have attended that. Now, the extension of that, part two of that is this program where we are talking about DevOps in Agile delivery, right? So what I'm going to cover is in the next couple of, say another 30-40 minutes before the Q&A is that what are the benefits of DevOps, right? What are the benefits of DevOps? And most importantly is the DevOps practices that enterprises are looking for primarily, right? When I say enterprises, it can be even startups, big startups or, banking and large financial institutions, banking and financial institutions. What do they do as part of DevOps, right? What are they looking at? Now that can really help you. One, to acquire the required skills that they are looking for. If you're a career aspirant. Two is that you update yourself and upskill yourself on these areas. And obviously, three is for the organizations, which really wants to do things on the agile, right? Now, I will not be getting too much detail into any of the individual practices, but I'll just, given the time constraint we have, just talk about some of them. At the same time, I'm not just going to read the bullet points. I'll talk a little bit about some of the practices that we have. Again, this is more of an overview session. And then I think the Q&A, last time when I did, we didn't have enough time for the Q&A. So maybe we will spend more time here on that, right? So I have a mural. I'm not a big fan of PPTs anymore now. So I just created this mural. I hope that you all could see that. What I will do is I'll just highlight certain areas where we move along. All right. So we are going to see DevOps benefits, DevOps practices, DevOps transformation approach for organizations, and some of the challenges in actual implementation. Right. So hopefully we cover all the topics today. So I will slightly make my Zoom bigger so that you can see the DevOps and benefits primarily. So it's basically the word is coined from 2008 by a Belgium independent consultant developer. So the idea is that if you look at very large traditional organizations, right, the IT operations, the infrastructure and operations are mostly firewalled or isolated from the development teams, where we have business analysts, QA, and developers. Now, for everything, you need to raise a ticket with them, wait for their request, and they had their own management. So the idea is that a group of people came together and found out that how we can work much more closely than the traditional approach. So that is why you have a word called it DevOps, right? It is development plus IT operations, right? So how you can collaborate right from the starting point, right from when I say service, right? I can consider an application as in service, right? In the service management area, application is considered as a service. So right from the inception of the idea till you take it to the production and then support it. Support it throughout the production. When I say support, obviously you make changes to the environment. How do we do this in collaboration with the operations team in a more effective way, right? So that is the overall definition of DevOps. Now, DevOps itself is part of Agile, right? So what actually happened is Agile has become an umbrella term. One area is Scrum, Kanban, where an Agile mindset, basically where we improve teams on certain ways of working. That is called ways of working. But there is other area which is technology, technical deliveries, tools. Now, you just do the first part and you don't do the second part. It may not help IT teams. It can probably help some other business teams. And I'm a firm believer in that because I come from a strong technical background rather than just an agile coach who talks about Scrum, or you call them as agile purist, without touching upon the technological aspects of an application. There is no way you can transform and deliver faster, right? So what we will see in the next topic is what are those practices primarily, right? So when you do DevOps, what happens usually? Okay, one is that improved time to market. You are able to deploy and deliver value to the customers um, in a very fast span of time, more frequently. Now, how frequently? How frequently? When you say Ganesh, is it how frequently? Is it like once in a scrum, end of the sprint, or is it like once in a week? That depends on the maturity of the DevOps journey that you are going through. Now, for example, Facebook, Amazon, they all deploy changes to the application multiple times in a day, not even once in 2 weeks and not even in a week, but multiple times in a day, right? So they are able to achieve that uh, by not just following one of the things like Scrum or Kanban, but by following some of the best practices in software engineering. Okay, so it improves when you follow DevOps. It improves the time to market. Second one is it is the backbone for incremental value delivery. You don't have the technology, tools, and best practices that helps your software engineering and delivery. You are not going to incrementally do any value delivery at all, right? You may probably develop it. You say, I'm following Agile, but I'm only deploying changes to the end user once in a year. How does that sound? Does it really make any sense, right? So why that is happening? We will cover that as part of challenges also. Why is that we are following a Scrum model, but I'm not able to deliver anything to my customer? What stops me, right? We'll see as part of the challenges. Now, DevOps also improves your quality, stability, and availability, right? Availability is it ensures that the application is available most of the times, right? Stability is you have a right failover solution. If one node fails, other node picks up. If I want to improve my if the end users on my system increases, then you have a new node that comes up, right? So nowhere my stability and availability is decreased. Last point is very important: automation, 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 right? When I say automation, please, I know a lot of testers would be there. You think about test automation, right? It is not about that. Automation is not always about testing. In fact, testing is one part of DevOps. In fact, you will see that when we talk about the practices, right? By and large, you automate the entire step right from your developer desktop. So when you do DevOps, why sometimes a DevOps transformation fails is because many a times as agile coaches and DevOps coaches, we don't know the life of a developer. If you don't know how a developer works, right, you are not able to advise him properly. So one of the main reasons that many DevOps transformation projects fail is also that, partly to blame the coaches, that we don't know the life of a software engineer, right? When I say software engineer, I mean developers. They form the core of it, right? They are the one who are actually developing the system, right? So you start looking at things from your developer desktop till you move it to the production. So these are some of the benefits of doing DevOps. Again, I want to reiterate it. It is part of the Agile umbrella, but more technical aspects and not just Scrum. I think the Scrum and Kanban is what we saw. They are equally important. I'm not saying that they are not, but without Scrum, you can do DevOps also. It's possible. You can do something else, right? But Scrum prepares you, prepares the team, and creates a mindset in this team that you can deliver value incrementally in small chunks. That is exactly what we see as sprints, right? At least deliver value to production once in 2 to 4 weeks. So once the team gets into the mindset, then implementing a technological change is not that difficult, right? So now I slowly move to the practices itself. This is quite an exhaustive list. I'm not, as I told you, I may not be able to discuss in detail about all the topics. Second one is that DevOps by itself is a very evolving area. Uh, there are a lot of new practices that are being added to the broader DevOps umbrella, right? So this is not a complete list, but I know by and large, this fit into most of the enterprise level. The first one which I have on the list is adoption of cloud, right? Cloud is a technology. Why adoption of cloud, right? Whether you call it as a private cloud. If you really look at my presentation, I've stayed away completely from the tools. There is a reason for that, because many in the DevOps space, they think that tools is equal to DevOps, or DevOps is equal to CI/CD tools, right? Tools definitely ensures that DevOps can be done, but most importantly, DevOps is a practice, right? A set of things that you do, right? So uh, just by learning a couple of tools, that maybe you can become a release engineer or have maintain a CI/CD pipeline. I'm not saying that uh, it is difficult to find a job or get into a team, but you can never be a DevOps coach, or somebody who drives a DevOps initiative in the organization. You need to know a bit about everything, the entire area. So adoption of cloud, you say private cloud, you have Pivotal Cloud Foundry, you can use that. In public, we have Amazon Web Services, GCP, Azure. Why do we adopt cloud? One is that you can roll out applications, you can roll out infrastructure very fast. It's subscription based. You can scale up and scale down. That is the most important things of the cloud, right? So whenever I want, for example, the load on my system increases, then I can roll out a couple of EC2 instances in AWS. So cloud offers you elasticity, right? Elasticity, in other words, is flexibility, right? That flexibility is very, very important if you want to adopt the DevOps practices. Now, without cloud, if you are using a traditional hardware in a data center, now the biggest problem is that I remember working for a very large bank that to get a server in one of the data centers, it took me a year. It took me a year to get a server, right? Now, I'm talking about 10, 15 years back. Now with cloud, I can get it in a day or two. I can get a EC2 instance, right? So that speed of execution, scaling up and down, that flexibility is important for DevOps. Second one is microservices based architecture. You see, again, I'm not talking about tools. Monolith applications, large applications, right, has to be broken down into small microservices that can run inside the containers. Why is this important? Because say I'm a developer, I'm working for a microservices. I can deploy my microservices anytime into the production. All I need to ensure is that my microservices works well with the other microservices of the same app or the same application, right? So just that it should not break it. I just need to run few tests to ensure that it doesn't break any part of it. But the deploying part, I can do it. I don't have to build a whole build of the entire application and then deploy it. So microservices gives you the flexibility to deploy application faster without much impact to the other areas. So many of you might have known, like you have containerization, CAS, right? So Dockers, Kubernetes, they all take care of this microservices, right? Again, the application has to be written in the microservices, right? So microservices architecture will really help. Now the third one is, you may say it is not a DevOps practice, but I still thought I don't really believe in jargons and terminologies too much. It probably helps you in cracking interviews and pleasing somebody who likes the same language, right? Most importantly is that pair programming and mob programming improves collaboration in the team. It helps you to remove bugs in the code much early in the life cycle. So I am a driver, and then there is another person who helps me. It's called a navigator. We sit together and do pair programming together. Teams that do pair programming, they see that the team morale is very high, right? There is, the teams learn from each other. They resolve a lot of issues much early on in the life cycle. So that is one of the reason I added pair programming into this. Mob programming is the same, like different. The entire team sits together and solves a problem, right? The fourth one is continuous integration for early feedback. Now, the CI/CD, we call it as CI/CD famously, is one part of DevOps. It's not just fully DevOps. But then, as I told you, tools CI/CD, just because they are so popular, it gets into as commonly called as DevOps practices, right? So it is like two developers in a team writing the own code, but every time they check into the main branch, how the code works, both the codes are tested against each other, right? The build is created. I write my unit test cases. Developers write his own unit and integration test cases. Another developer writes his own unit and integration test cases. When I say write unit integration test cases, I'm not talking about writing manual using tools like JUnit, for example, if you are a Java developer, right? Then the pipeline runs, CI pipeline runs, right? When the CI pipeline runs, I can also scan the code for code quality, any design issues, right? We use tools like SonarQube there, right? So then, why do we do that? Why should I do it daily, right? Basically, all the code between the developers are tested much early on in the life cycle. All the issues are resolved. What if my build breaks, right? Then I get to know immediately. I fix my code. Then I again run the CI process. Then ensure that my bugs are resolved. This keeps on going on a daily basis, right? That is called continuous integration for early feedback. You have continuous integration servers like Jenkins and TeamCity, which will help you to do that. Now, this is something that happens on daily basis. Now, you have a more matured process, right? Then you have another pipeline called continuous delivery or deployment. Now, you see the difference between delivery and deployment, right? Delivery is like, you develop, you test, you keep it, but I don't deploy it onto production. I could not deploy it onto production for some reason, or I will deploy it later, right? But still, my code is developed and tested, and it is maintained in the environment. I can move to deployment very quickly. That is the difference between delivery and deployment. Deployment is actually moving into production itself, right? So then you have to build a continuous delivery pipeline. When you do the continuous delivery pipeline, what is most important is you need to have the entire tests that are automated, which we'll talk about it later. So most important when I do the CI/CD pipeline is use state-of-art CI/CD tools to build the pipelines. Like I spoke about Jenkins, SonarQube, JUnit, You need to have Artifactory, all those tools. They are all the best tools that are available in the market. You use them to build a CI/CD pipeline. Now, for companies which are able to achieve multiple deployments in a single day, means that their process is so mature that as soon as the CI is done, then immediately when they run the CD pipeline, it will do a couple of automated tests on different environments. Once the test passes, it directly goes to the production, right? So even the smallest of the change is a value to the customer, right? But you are able to deliver that value every single day. So the ideal state is multiple deployments to production in a day. Now you may want to go back and check how I'm doing, right? On your in your organizations where I am with respect to the DevOps, right? The part here is code repository branching and merging strategy is another important thing. This most of the times we use Git or GitHub. So how do you have your branching strategy and merging strategy? Do you create a branch for every feature? Do you create a branch for every developer, or you just have one brain branch that everybody commits their code onto? When do you want to run the pipeline? Okay, so mostly after committing the code to the pipeline. So a DevOps person should basically come out with a branching and merging strategy for your project team. Now, the another one is a consistent code review process, right? One, pair programming, right? Of course, we saw about pair programming and mob programming, right? Uh, Code review, at least 2 cycles of review, one by the peer and other one by a lead, before you actually push the code to the production, right? So code review practices are very important, right? It can be one of the metric also. How many code reviews have happened? How many code commits I have done in a day is a very good DevOps metric, right? Um, this one, secure coding practices. Now, most of you might be aware of the next one called the DevSecOps, which is security embedded, security aspects. Now, all those jargons are great, DevSecOps, but the points are very simple, right? You basically have to ensure that security is one of the key aspects when you practice DevOps. That is DevSecOps, nothing else. So it is not a discipline by itself. Don't try to go and do a certification on DevSecOps and waste your time. Basically, you have a scanning tools, multiple security scanning tools that is embedded as part of your CI pipeline. For example, 45, right? Black Duck, many tools are there in the market, scanning tools, vulnerability scanning tools embedded in your DevOps. So what happens basically is your code is scanned daily basis because as I told you, you run your CI pipeline daily if you are a matured organization. So as and when you write your code gets scanned. All the security vulnerabilities are caught much earlier on the life cycle. Now, one step above that is actually coding practices itself. There are multiple coding practices that you can follow where when you write code itself, you understand the security loopholes of your code and you tackle them at the type of coding itself. For example, one of the example I can give you is when you use SQL statements, use prepared statements, right? Prepared statements ensure that the hacker cannot take advantage over your SQL statements. There are multiple coding practices like that. Again, the list is quite exhaustive. But if you're a developer and if you want to go on a work for a large organizations, I know many companies are already started to talk about this in the last couple of years. That now what is happening with DevOps is that increasingly when a developer is hired or a tester is hired, people are asking how much of testing and DevOps, I mean, development, in a DevOps environment, which means that a company that hires you, it is easier I mean, I do consulting for a bank, and I tell them that add this as one of the requirement in your skills. Because I know developers, they come and say, I don't want to write unit tests. That's a problem for the company which wants to transform, right? So increasingly, organizations have started to see like, okay, it's great that you're a developer, but do you know cloud? You might have many developers, you might have seen that they do cloud certifications and read a lot about cloud. Do you write unit test case? Do you do secure coding? Have you worked on a CI/CD pipeline? Right? Then you are in. Next is your programming logic, experience, because they started looking into all these aspects also, right? Um, we are here now. Shift left strategy in testing. What do you mean by shift left strategy? So continuous integration, writing unit test, running your test daily against other developers' code is actually shifting the testing completely left to the left. What do we do? What did we do earlier? Right? Even if you follow Scrum, we do testing at the end of the sprint. If a 4-week sprint, I do testing at the end of the 4 weeks. Nah, that's not good. Move the testing to the developers, right? I don't know, many probably are doing it, but I know companies which are doing really good on that, but I also know companies which are trying to get that practice built. But it is one of the key requirements now, writing unit test cases, right? So that is a shift left strategy. Moving a lot of automation thing to the developers, making developers in charge of their code quality, even secure coding, right? Means that developers are responsible. You can no longer go out. This is a mindset thing. You no longer a developer can go and say that, I finished my job. I know when I used to be in the testing teams, a developer will give a crappy build and then he will wait for my bugs and then he will start fixing it. Now, what if the testing teams are not there, right? So the mindset change is primarily making developers accountable for their own code. Um, Reliable automation test suites, right? If you want your code from to move, we call it as one-click deployment. Right from my PC, as soon as I check in my code to GitHub, my code has to move to production. If I have to automate that, if I need that, then my automation test suites should cover every single aspect of testing. Now, who is going to do it? Is a different story. Is a developer going to do the test automation? Yes, he will do some part. But in the new age, I can tell you a lot of test automation needs to be done by the developers. But of course, certain end-to-end test automation or functionality-related test automation is being done by the testers as well, right? So that is a scenario now, right? The other one is infrastructure as a code. You might have heard that IAC. If you have worked on AWS, it is like you have 10 servers in an environment. Now I want to build another environment of 10 servers, which has got multiple configurations inside. Now to build another 10 servers itself will take another 1 month. I have to remember all the configuration, do it manually. How about creating a test environment and then storing all the information in a file, something like a JSON file or YAML file? Then I can create the same 10 servers with all the exact configurations by just running that in a tool called CloudFormation. If you use AWS, it is CloudFormation. If you use something else, it is some other name. I'm not familiar with all the cloud names. I'm more of a AWS guy on that. Then the entire environment is built very quickly, right? That is infrastructure as a code. The last one is service monitoring solutions, right? Service monitoring solutions. You have your service which is up and running, but you need to monitor. There are excellent tools. Some of you might be using Nagios. There are other tools like App Dynamics, right? So all these practices, everyone, I tried to highlight it at a very, very higher level, the last 15, 20 minutes. put together constitutes DevOps, not just CI/CD, or not just cloud, or not just XP programming, or not just test automation. It's a bunch of practices. Now, this list can keep on adding because, as I told you, DevOps is a more of an umbrella term. The same thing happened with Agile, right? When Agile came, then any way of delivering application faster became part of Agile, right? Likewise, this can really be, for example, blue-green deployment, right? I have a green deployment. I have my application always ready in a green environment. Say blue is my production and green is a pre-production environment. When I actually do a change, I can quickly switch the traffic so that the end users never sees any service outage at all. You see a lot of companies nowadays, you see, our application will not be ready from this time to this time, Saturday morning 10 a.m. to Sunday evening 5 p.m. Many applications are there, right? Now, why is it there? Our application is under maintenance. Why is because they don't follow DevOps. They don't have anything like a blue or green deployment. If I have a blue-green deployment, then the change should basically happen very quickly. Now, DevOps also helps you in rolling back your changes in a very fast way, right? Now you use a tool called Artifactory, where you maintain both the artifacts, current artifact and the previous artifact. You move the current artifact, something happens to the production, switch it to the previous artifact. All these things are taken care by your CI/CD pipeline. So it's a bunch of tools and technologies and practices that helps you to improve your delivery primarily, deliver value ideally on a daily basis. Anyway, so that's all about the practices, which is the core of my session today. The rest is all pretty straightforward. So DevOps transformation approach, our organization should approach it. It's more from the organization perspective. Now you can apply it to individuals also, right? Now I am a developer, but I don't know anything about DevOps. What should I do, right? So like an organization, you have to do a DevOps health check. What do I do about identify the areas of improvements, ideally gaps, right? What are the areas I can do? Now, drive DevOps engineering practices in the team. How do I do it in my team, right? So different companies take a different approach. Few companies form a DevOps practice organization, and then they hire a lot of DevOps engineers, and these DevOps engineers acts as a change agents. They go and teach practices, implement tools into different multiple teams. Uh, in some organization, you directly hire a DevOps engineer. In some organization, I know that there is no role called DevOps engineer, right? They say developer can take care of the DevOps environment also if he has got time. So basically, if you are following Scrum, then that becomes one of the user story. Building your building your CI/CD pipeline and practices, right? Is one of the user story that you cater to. So, um, but one of the challenge which I see is that many companies organization level, they don't understand very clearly what it is. So I only see lack of clarity, and some organizations have nailed it. So I have been part of both the companies, organizations which have clearly nailed it, companies which has got their own notions, right? That's a little shallow implementation that way, right? Um, Now the other one is that build a CI/CD pipelines. This is exactly what I mentioned. You can use Jenkins as the core CI/CD server, but that is just one part of it. Then you have all the tools that are part of the entire pipeline, all the way up to the cloud environment, right? Uh, this is the fourth point is the one which I like talking about a lot. As a coach, I practice that. As I told you, I don't believe in jargons or terminologies. If the practice is good, uh, how simple I can take this change to the team. Because software engineering teams, don't understand all jargons. You have to tell them in the language that they understand, right? So stop being prescriptive, right? Don't tell that you have to be. Take more practical approach towards DevOps. DevOps is a maturity. You cannot achieve anything. You cannot become a completely on and in and out DevOps team in a span of 2 to 3 months. If you are already practicing some other model, it will take some time, right? So you need to be a little bit more practical when you want to transform your organization. Here I'm talking about transformation. Transformation sometimes takes time. Upskill the teams on DevOps practices. Hiring focused more on DevOps skills, right? When you hire a developer, you ask him like, talk about your DevOps experience. What do you know about it? What is that you have practiced? It's not about what you know. What is that you have practiced, right? Uh, then try to understand that. Then the organization change management perspective, right? So you are inducing a change in the organization. Few people may like it, few people may embrace the change, few people may not embrace the change. Right? Why should I do this? I don't want to do it. So you need to know how to do it. Most often it is done through good training and communication, right? Then if you could train your resources or create awareness sessions or communicate properly through awareness sessions. Multiple change management, for example, you can write monthly newsletters. When I used to work in Barclays, like we had something called a monthly newsletter where we talk about one DevOps topic. Like for example, I introduced a new tool in the organization. I talk about the benefits of the tool and where it exactly fits, how it can make your life easier. So that kind of promotes adoption, right? Then the last one is define and collect metrics, right? So you can have a number of metrics. For example, percentage of unit code coverage. Code coverage is a very important metrics because it tells whether the team is able to identify bugs much early in the life cycle, that is during the code itself, right? So if your code coverage is around 90%, then it is very good, right? You are covering most of the conditions, unit testing code, right? Then your test automation, planned versus actual, how much that you have planned and what is your actual, right? That can be one of the important test metrics. Code reviews, how many code reviews you did, how many hours you spent on pair programming, right? And how many changes you make to the production, how many deployments you make to the production every day, right? How many of those deployments that you make to the production was successful? You make a production, nothing works, you roll back. What is the big fun about it? Nothing, right? So all these metrics, if you collect from the team after you adopt DevOps, then it can help you to continuously improve. Metrics are basically a way to look at how continually you can improve on the DevOps side, right? Then I'll just go to the last topic before I open up the Q&A. Challenges in the implementation is basically very straightforward challenges. You may say teams work in silos. Dev, test, BA, infra. You raise an infrastructure request, and then that request to take 3 weeks to get completed. Now, if a request takes 3 weeks to get completed, how would I ever deploy changes to the production on a daily basis, right? So, developer waiting for the testers to do the testing of their code. Okay, so which is wrong. So you have to basically, teams working in silo is a problem. We should all work in a collaborative way. Now the other challenge is very important is dependency on other applications. Yeah, my application in banks we call it as downstream applications and upstream applications, right? Application that sends data to me, and the applications that I send data to are downstream applications, right? That sends data to me are upstream. Now you can say, I mean, we are following DevOps. I'm not able to do multiple deployments in a week. Now, don't think that bad that you could not make multiple deployments in a day. That is the ideal state. But if you are not there at all, if you could make deployments once in a sprint, that is once in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks is more or less getting a standard in sprint, right? Now, when you say 4 week sprint, people say you are following waterfall model, right? So 2 weeks is much more intense, right? So if you are able to deploy something every week, once in a sprint, that is still good, but people still are not able to deploy it to production. When I say production, why is because, oh, my code, my application is not tested with the other application. The other application is not ready. We have a UAT team which has to do end-to-end testing. We have an integration testing team that has to run manual integration testing. Now, this is a major problem for DevOps. How that can be solved? By working through the organization and finding out the right operating rhythm. This cannot be solved with the tools, mind you. That's why I said tools will not solve your problem. You cannot become a DevOps expert or DevOps following DevOps practices just by having tools. The entire team should have an operating rhythm. Tests should be automated much early on in the cycle. There are many ways to automate tests than before. Service virtualization is a way that I can uh, do all dependency checks during my coding itself. You can use frameworks like Mockito, where you can mock the test to avoid dependencies. There are many ways there. So, but still, the organization should support that. The third one is very slow infrastructure provisioning. As I told you, I gave an example. Lack of infra automation. Like you don't use things like IAC. Every time I want to build a new environment, I have to wait for a month. Now, how will I do it? Right? So infrastructure has to be automated. So if you have followed, I mean, if you own your own infra, I'm saying the development team owns the own infra, which is rarely the case in big enterprises, right? And maintain it, then it is much easier. But that is not the case. So what should we do basically is ensure that the infra side of things is also heavily automated. So you have all the CI/CD pipeline, everything very good. It is moving up to one environment in the testing. That's it. It breaks there because your production environment is very slow. There is no automation there. It will still pull you down. That happens with a lot of organizations. And that is why they came out with a new term called continuous delivery, right? It is just to make ourselves comfortable. Hey, I'm not able to deploy to production. At least I have a code. I will deploy to production later. But actually, that is a failure, right? Because as an organization, you are not able to deploy code to the production, right? It's an organization level failure, not a team level failure, right? So that is the fifth thing, right? Fear of failure. If I use DevOps, if I do complete automation, if I don't do test automation, if I don't do manual testing, what if it goes to production, it fails? Accept failures. In any case, no testing guarantees 100% bug free, right? So failures have to be accepted. No blame games after the failures because we all agreed to adopt DevOps. So we are all responsible for the failure. The last one is shortage of skills. Now, when we talk about so many practices, right, you need people with all these skills, right, to actually scale it up and do. Mind you, when you talk of very large enterprise, right? So I worked in an organization. The maximum number of IT is around 5,000 people. 5,000 resources in IT organization is where I worked. The maximum, right? Maybe even more than that. I don't get the count. Right? We are talking about huge, right? And the IT supports business, so we are answerable to the business, right? So when you're talking about very large numbers, right, then you need a lot of skills. Now we call it as agile talent density. A good word is talent density, right? If the agile talent density is very low in your organization, it can pull you down, even if you are trying to move up. Some of them are there, but others will pull you down. right? So you should have the right skills. Now that can be to some extent achieved by upskilling and hiring the right people. So that's about it from me. Thanks for listening to me, and I think this session is open to Q&A now. Right. So what are the benefits of implementing DevOps automations? As I told you, right? Um, Basically, delivering value very fast to the customers, right? Completely tested, high quality delivery to customers, ideally on daily basis or once in a week, especially within the scope of software applications. So I assume that you are asking in the scope of software applications. This is primarily within the scope of software applications, right? So if you follow automation, any automation improves the speed. That's quite natural, right? What will be the role of a tester and especially manual testers? I think I think uh, there are certain practices which may not die per se, right? So instead of being very pessimistic to your question, I would say that start learning test automation, right? So DevOps is all about automation. DevOps is all about automation. So manual testers don't have much scope in DevOps. But if you're an automation tester, you can at least ensure that you write end-to-end tests. For example, you can write tests on Selenium, Tosca, or any of the testing tools and embedded those test cases, test automation into your CI/CD pipeline, CD pipeline, right? Manual, but at the same time, it depends on the organization, right? I mean, sometimes companies prefer to have manual testers because they have very good domain knowledge on a particular product. But yeah, the automation is the key. Any other questions? Oh, there are quite a lot of questions, so maybe I didn't read it. So as a DevOps engineer, do we need to facilitate the technology stack for the team? Or there isn't a separate role? I don't think we have any role to talk about the tech stack. Usually the tech stack is basically comes from a solution architect. Again, a very fancy word, but if you work, a senior developer is a solution architect, right? So we don't really, but we have to recommend the CI/CD tools, the complete tool set, starting from Jira, right, to what are all the tools that we use. That is our job, but not really the tech stack. Whether you want to use Java or .NET or a Python, or that's not our job, right? The next question. Currently, I'm leading AD team having only developers without having testers. Can DevOps I think DevOps primarily, as I told you, right? DevOps primarily pushes your testing on the left side, shift left strategy. So you are well placed with the developers. So all you need to do is that your developers have to be coached on the DevOps practices, and they should follow DevOps practices. Um, we call it as an old school and a new school, right? So interestingly, the old school and new school has nothing to do with age, right? It is just about the mindset. So few people don't like changes at all. Few people embrace change very fast. So you need to ensure that your developers embrace the DevOps change. A lot of questions around the QA, right? I mean, shift left does QA should be in. I mean, again, depends on what kind of QA. In the world of DevOps, right? Um, there is a lot of emphasis on developers doing it, doing unit testing, right integration testing, using tools like JUnit, Mockito, right? And for testers, it is some UI test automation or API test automation embedded into the pipeline. So when I say shift left, I meant that moving the mindset from the testers to developers. DevOps can be applied only to software architect. Yes, absolutely. It is only for software. How to handle biggest challenge of people working in isolation? It's hard. I mean, that's why I said, like, the two-part series that we did during this program, right? When you do Scrum, right, when you can see the collaboration between the teams are improving already. Developers, testers, BAs. I don't know which organization you represent, but when you as a first step, for example, when we do consulting to companies, we go in as agile coaches, and we also take a DevOps person along with that. The reason behind the approach is that I help the teams getting collaborated following Scrum, and then there is an hands-on engineer who basically ensures the tools aspect of it, right? So when you do Scrum, automatically the collaboration will improve through, daily stand-ups, because everybody has to, talk about what they did, what they accomplished yesterday, today, and what are the challenges. Every day they need to do for 15 minutes, and that improves the collaboration in a big way. All right. Is there any other question? How DevOps differentiates? A Scrum is a framework. It has nothing to do with the technology, tools, or anything. It is a framework how the team. DevOps is actually the technological change and the software engineering practices that you need to adopt in your team. Scrum doesn't say anything. Scrum talks about how your teams can collaborate well, how they can work together, uh, how you can organize your teams in sprints, but it doesn't talk about anything like unit testing, test automation, cloud. So DevOps is the agile consists of two aspects. One is agile models, right, which is Scrum, Kanban. The second one is technology. So DevOps is part of the technology aspect. Uh, with agile mindset, is DevOps mandatory to fully call as an agile environment? Uh, if you want, so this is what I want to say. If you are just following, if you are just having mindset, and you are, say, imagine you are a IT team of 9 people. You say that we are doing Scrum, we have an agile mindset, but we are not doing any of the DevOps things. Then you are not truly agile. That is my view, and that is a view from all the organizations also, right? The problem is Scrum is oversold. Scrum is a oversold commodity, right? It became so popular, people started thinking that Scrum is equal to agile, which is wrong, right? So that is a problem, right? Not neither your mindset nor Scrum will solve the problem, but it all helps. It all helps in uh, everything is a catalyst, right? It helps you to organize yourselves. Right mindset helps you to organize yourselves and approach the problem. But DevOps is very, very important. As I told you, it is the backbone of incremental value delivery. Me coming from a technical background, yes, I mean, I do agile coaching also, and I teach Scrum also, but knowing both the worlds, I can say just mindset won't help. Yeah. All right, I think I am done with all the questions. Uh, we have 1 more minute. I think we are back on time. So if there are no further questions, I again thank you for joining. Hope you all enjoyed the session, and there are some takeaway from this session as well. You all have a good evening, and thank you again. Bye.